Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this Friday live stream. I'm Salvador Cordova, and welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. And we are privileged this afternoon to be joined by my co-host, S.J. Thomason. So, S.J., please introduce yourself. The last time you were here, your visit was very popular, and people were saying we want more of this. So it's been maybe at least a couple months since you've been on our channel, and I'm glad that you visited.
Oh, thank you so much. No, thank you so much. I'm really happy to come on. I actually had the pleasure of listening to you yesterday on another channel, on Logical, Plausible, Probables channel, and I thought that was quite an interesting talk that you had, and I listened to all of it, actually, believe it or not. So I was painting my bathroom and listening in, and it was very interesting. So thank you for that.
Well, I was impressed with the speed that you're able to complete your painting jobs. And I said, if you ever stop being a college professor, you could be a professional painter. So
I know my husband was teasing me on that. He said I should. He said something kind of similar. He said, "Why don't you work on the side as a painter? I probably can get you hired." I'm like, "No." So it's kind of funny.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I have a channel. It's just called S.J. Thomason. I kind of wish I would have made it something different. I call it Psalm 23 Apologetics, actually. And but you'd find it through S.J. Thomason. And I like to put out lots of Christian videos because I feel that it's the way, the truth, and the life. And I've been brought to Jesus I was born again a number of years ago. And so I've decided to spend all of my time, my spare time, figuring out ways to bring his good news to other people because he is the truth and we have tons of evidence. And so once you know that, you realize that we have a lot of evidence out there and his resurrection is fully supported, then you have to do the logical thing and just accept his kindest offer of grace. And that's all. It's very simple.
Now I saw that one of the titles for your website, you have a website, it's Christian Apologist?
Yeah, Christian-apologist.com.
Okay, what I need to remember to do is to I'm going to add the links to your channel and website to the video description. So let me give greetings to everyone here, to Mr. Jetty89, Patrick Alexander, Christian Northam, and Andrew Kaufman. Thank you for joining us. So the word apologist, we had a very interesting conversation that got started in our church because of something J. Warner Wallace said, and then this whole thing about branding. Because the word apology, at least in the English language, it's like, oh, we made a mistake. We need to apologize for this. Mm-hmm. And so J. Warner Wallace said, we need to stop using that word. And so J. Warner Wallace wrote Cold Case Christianity. He was a nationally renowned murder detective. And as far as I know, up until recently, he was still working as a police officer and a detective, doing his Cold Case Christianity and then going to seminary. He's a very busy gentleman. And but be very, very respected because of his work as a famous murder detective, but then becoming a Christian. So I think when he was on national TV for having solved cold cases, he may not have been a Christian at the time. And so he has he runs the Cold Case Christianity website and wrote the book by the same name. And he kind of had my sympathies that maybe we should use a different word. So he says we should be case builders. And I'm just like, nah, I don't like that either. Obviously, though, that means a lot to him because he works on cases. And then in my church, I said, if you talk to people under, say, 30 or 25 and you say apologetics, are like, what's that? And so we had a minor disagreement in our church what we should name it, and they ended up saying, no, we'll stick with apologetics. The leader said, we'll stick with apologetics. And I said, okay, just name it what you want. And I said, okay, I'm going to name my website Evidence and Reasons. But in the process of that, ended up having a Bible study of my own. I said, okay, I just want to see what the word apologetics means, how it's been used in the Bible. So that's going to be kind of the topic today. And it actually gave me some insights, because I see when I first was studying the topic and I was around people, their attitude was like, oh, wow, we're just going to be persuasive, we'll win debates and people be converted. And of course, it doesn't work quite that way.
No.
And so I said, let me just look through the scriptures. Let's see how the word has actually, how Greek is. You have a root word and there's so many variations. And so it's not exactly always the same root word. And so I just wanted to invite you, and we'll just go through some of the verses. So what are your feelings about this, since you used the word apologist?
Yeah, well, I came to the word because it was the idea that I would be defending Christianity. And I realized, just like you did years ago, when I got onto Twitter for the first time, I actually got on there about 2014 and started getting active. And around 2015 and 2016, I quickly realized that people weren't necessarily going to believe my story of how I came to faith, because it was my personal story and my personal experiences. So I realized, well, geez, maybe I should go out there and start reading some more books and to figure out what evidence we have to support that. And I remember an atheist challenged me on Twitter, and I was very worried at first. He said, I challenge you to read Bertrand Russell. And he goes, and I'll read whatever you want me to read. And so he said, Bertrand Russell is their top atheist philosopher. And I said, okay, you go read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, because I found the trilemma entirely compelling. And that was one of the reasons of many that I came back to Christianity. But I said, you go read C.S. Lewis. And I had read C.S. Lewis. I was recommended that book by a pastor on a plane, which I feel that God put us together. And he gave me that great book recommendation along with some other books. And he told me about Isaiah 53, which I didn't know about. And so he gave me a lot of good information. But anyway, I had about that much information. I hadn't really read anything besides the C.S. Lewis books. And at that point, and so I went and I read Bertrand Russell, and I was actually kind of scared. I thought, oh my gosh, what are they going to say that's going to counter my faith? And am I just going to be in shambles after I read this? And I read his evidence of why he's not a Christian. And I thought, what? That's the best they have? That's awful. It's just terrible. And so then I thought, well, now I'm starting to build my confidence. So I started reading all of these other atheist books along with my Christian books that I got. I read J. Warner Wallace's books, a couple of them actually. Cold Case Christianity, I felt, was a really strong book. I read, what else did I read? I read a lot of, actually, I just went onto his website, Reasonable Faith, a lot of William Lane Craig stuff, Frank Turek, I read a lot of his stuff. So I just started reading and reading and reading. And then I read Richard Dawkins' books and Sam Harris's books. And I thought, they're such poor cases for atheism. I mean, I know they have kind of an argument with the argument for evil, the problem of evil, but I feel that that's countered by the problem of love. How do they explain this idea of love? And so anyway, I think we can build a really strong case, and I don't think that they have anything against it.
I mean, I'm just going to say this: the problem of love. Actually, this is the first time I ever heard that stated. I mean, is that original to you, or? If it is, that's great.
No, I'm sure I've probably got it from others in readings that I've done. I must have. No, I think I have. William Lane Craig has said some things on love being an issue, because how do they explain the fact that we know that we should make self-sacrifices and do things like that? You can explain away our empathy for others in some ways, but if you realize the self-sacrificing issue. A lot of people explain our moral code by looking at intuitions and reasoning. And they say, and going all the way back to people like Immanuel Kant and others, but then you realize there's something that goes beyond that. So if I'm standing at a pond and there's an alligator pulling a small child into the pond, my intuition is to run away and protect myself. But my conscience, that Christian synderesis, tells me, no, go after and save the baby. And so you make these self-sacrifices. And I think that's a problem for atheists, is this idea of this just self-sacrificial love.
This is interesting. Someone who's a theistic evolutionist and probably one of the most respected scientists in the world is Francis Collins. Now, me being a creationist, I've had obviously some problems with the group that he founded, but I actually think I thought very highly of him. And he said one reason he believes in God is exactly that. He said, which is amazing because he said evolutionary theory cannot explain that. He said, I accept common descent, but that's one thing that can't be explained.
That's great. I didn't know he said that. I actually have read that he also came to Christianity. The trilemma really helped him too. I have read that.
Well, it's amazing how people come to faith. He came from a secular upbringing, and he was in medical school or maybe completing his residency. A very brilliant person. And one thing you find out very quickly is, even being a medical doctor, you can't create life, and you have limits. And that's one thing that, when I deal with medical doctors who are Christians, they seem to sense death is kind of in their face a lot. And he had one of these patients that was terminally ill. He couldn't quite grasp why she had so much peace in her life. And he said, this is something I can't give as a medical doctor. All of his great accomplishments, being at Yale, he was a physical chemist. And when he came to talk at my university, it was quantum mechanics he actually studied too. And then he's a medical doctor on top of that. So he's very accomplished. That encounter began to turn him when that dying woman was professing Christ. He said that was
powerful.
Also, yeah. Oh yeah, very powerful. And so with that, I'm just going to share some scriptures. Just so if you see me looking at all these monitors, I have various scriptures here, and I have my list of scriptures. The famous one that people refer to, and I'm going to show this. Let's see, share screen. Where we get the word apologetics is 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. So we could call it Christian defense, but the word here, hopefully you could see my cursor, it says apologion, is a defense. And the nice thing about Greek is it's English-like. The grammar is close enough to English. Hebrew is really hard. I gave up trying to learn Hebrew. At least you could kind of see with this interlinear, it's very easy. You could just Google a verse and say interlinear, and it will give you the Greek. So, Lord, however, Christ sanctify in the hearts of you, ready always for a defense to everyone, asking you an account concerning in you hope, yet with gentleness and fear. So that's where we get the word apologetics. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I said, let me just look in the Bible for other verses that deal with this. So I'm just going to go through some verses, and that's, so I'll just get your thoughts on that. I mean, if there's nothing really much to say, that's.
No, that's great. I like this idea. Somebody in the chat, though, they're saying, am I saying that you don't have the urge to save the child if you're an atheist? I'm actually not saying that. I think atheists help to also prove the case for God, because they, I just want to add this really quickly before I miss that question. I think the idea that God has implanted a moral code in all of us, and we all have this urge. It's not just the Christians standing there at the pond. It's everyone would have this self-sacrificial urge and this little conscience that's ringing at us, unless somehow we've seared our conscience. So I think that's, yeah. And I agree with you.
That was the question there? Okay.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure, because some people think that Christians, and some Christians have disparaged atheists, and I'm sure I don't have a perfect past in my own ways. So if I've said something, I apologize today. So you can give an apologize or an apologist.
Okay, so I'm going to show another scripture here. And then we'll just go through the scriptures, and then it's great the audience is interacting and give us things they want to talk about. For myself, and actually, before I'm gonna cue this up. For me, the reason I came back to Christianity when I nearly left 21 years ago, the reason well, first off, let's say why I am compassionate to certain segments of atheists, because I was there in the sense that my father was dying. And I said, I've not, God hasn't really spoken to me in terms of audible. It's like, God, you could really help me believe if you just show up and talk to me and we have a conversation like I do, at least I could call 911 and I'll have a conversation with someone and I can call for help. Can you do the same for me? You would make yourself more tangible and real to me if you did that. And Dad was terminally ill at the time. And that, that can be very, I began to appreciate what people go through, especially in the church. That can cause a lot of doubts. It's like, am I just talking to nothing? Because the feeling was God felt as silent as all the other gods. I don't believe in the other gods like Zeus or Athena or Aphrodite. I mean, even though Homer's Iliad and Odyssey were just beautiful stories, I said I could almost like these kind of gods. But they aren't. It didn't feel like they were there helping me, so I didn't believe them. So in that sense, it's like, yeah, I was really there. And then I got a lot of brush off at church. The fact that I even raised questions was given such a negative response. And I said, that's never the way I'm treated. When I'm in mathematics, I don't understand something, they explain it. And I wasn't getting that at church. I said, I never got harsh treatment because I didn't understand or comprehend why something was true. And actually, this is kind of my feeling on some levels. The Christian churches today have been really powerful atheist factories because of the way they treated tough questions. And it's been a little bit disappointing being in church where you would think that'd be the place for it to be treated. And I realized kind of their quote unquote business model is to avoid hard questions. They want to entertain you, give you a social club. And actually some polling has actually suggested that's the model that a lot of churches follow, because some people were honest enough in the poll to say, that's not the reason I go to church. Being with God is not the main reason that I go to church, to worship him. It's a social club. They want their children to have activities. Their family was trying to get there. Their potential spouses or their spouses were there, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been kind of difficult to deal with. So
can I add to that just for a second?
Please.
It reminds me of a lot of studies and meta-analytic studies that I found on intrinsic versus extrinsic religiosity. And extrinsic is this idea that you go to church for what church provides to you. It's kind of like ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But instead, it's more like what your country can do for you. And versus the idea of intrinsic religiosity, which is this idea of going to church because you want to develop your relationship with Jesus Christ and you're believing for those reasons. The outcomes of being extrinsically religious versus intrinsically are extrinsic's kind of bad for you in a way, but the intrinsic religiosity correlates with all kinds of positive outcomes. Like it helps with things like depression or suicide and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, thank you. I did not know that. See, I knew it'd be good to talk to you because you're well read on these matters, and I appreciate hearing that. So I was being criticized, and I said, don't treat me like someone who hates the faith. So many of these Christians are treating me like I hate the faith. I said, I'm asking these questions because I want to believe. Can you help me? And this was a long, ongoing struggle, and some people were saying really negative things about me because I'd ask these tough questions, and I'm just like. So now when you see some of my demeanor when I talk to the other atheists, I try to remember that there are probably people out there that was me 21 years ago. And so what changed my mind was the study of intelligent design. Jesus said, especially when you're being anxious, consider the lilies of the valley, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these. And, earlier in my life when I heard that verse, I didn't give it that much thought. And I mean, like a lot of things, we don't necessarily revere the words like we ought to. And then it hits you. Because as I began to study biology, I was like, oh my goodness, there is a creator. He's chosen not to talk to us audibly. That being said, I did have a vision at age like 13 or 12. And so maybe that was what tipped the balance for me. I did have a vision. I still don't know whether it was of God or not. I was in the Catholic Church and I saw, I was just reading a hymn, and I was really not in a particularly religious mood. I was just like in the Catholic Church, you're trying to learn the ceremonies. Yeah. So this is the night before my confirmation. I was just trying to, read the words of the hymn and sing it. And suddenly the light just came on, and I said, who's monkeying with the lights in the church? I was really kind of annoyed. And I looked up and I saw this light, and
wow.
I said, that's kind of an interesting fluorescent light. And I just kept reading, and then I looked again, and it was a flame coming out of the right side of the cross. And I kept looking, and then it slowly disappeared. Wow. I went home that night, and I thought I was going to die. It's like, what did I see? What did I see? So it wasn't like I didn't have, and I had been involved sadly in some astrology and what we would call now New Age practices. That's kind of a nice word. The word really is occult. And I'm kind of ashamed of my involvement in that. I became a Christian because through the Catholic Church, because I was hearing the word preached, and I just kept hungering for it when I heard the epistles. And so it wasn't like I didn't have anything, but then I had the science later on in life. That's what changed it for me. But I'm going to cover this verse. Jesus said, are you going to leave me now? When he was talking to the apostles, and Peter said, where else will we go? You have words of eternal life. And so when I nearly left the faith, I asked the atheists, I said, okay, so, I was really thrilled about their skepticism, and I could be open about doubts, and I was actually welcomed for asking questions. I'm like, this is so refreshing compared to the way I get treated in church. I'm welcome for asking hard questions. And I said, okay, so tell me why should I have hope and meaning in my life? Dead silence. And Randolph Richardson encapsulated it recently after his debate with John Maddox. And by the way, thank you I actually didn't see the debate, and you're cutting clips of what he said. And I said, I need to listen to this guy's, because sometimes he throws out these gems. On his one of these open mics, Randolph Richardson showed up after his debate with John Maddox, and someone runs this website, Answers in Atheism, and I said, I don't think there are answers in atheism. Randolph Richardson typed in, he said, atheism provides answers for nothing. And I'm like, that's exactly right. You're the first to actually be so bold to say it. Atheism provides answers for nothing.
I caught Pine Creek Doug said that too, so I made a video about him saying it.
See, you spend more time analyzing debates and very methodically, and I didn't know that. So we can make a collection. We can make a collection of the things it doesn't answer. And I said, I said, up until this point, I said, you guys were making just a compelling case. And I said, well, where does this lead? And Paul actually summarized it. He said, if the dead are not raised, then let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And I was pretty close to say, okay, maybe all I'll do is just try to live my life out as painlessly as possible, because you've not, that doesn't feel like a lot to live for. And I said, no, I can't, you guys have nothing to offer me. I'll take what little scraps of belief I have left. And there really wasn't much left. I said, I'm going to go back and search out for answers. because I do have that spark that I think God is real. You haven't quite eliminated that. And I couldn't, so that's why I'm here today. This is a culmination, 21 years since that point.
Yeah, and that's the thing is there are Christianity explains so many things. It explains our origins, our meaning, our morality, our destiny, our purpose, all that kind of stuff. And atheism just doesn't have any answers. And a lot of times atheists will kind of say, well, okay, we don't know how we got here, how the earth formed, how this all came about, how the universe started, or anything like that. But we're just going to say we're comfortable with I don't know as an answer. And I'm not comfortable with I don't know if there's a possible way that we can find an answer. And you said something yesterday that I thought it really resonated with me, because your position on young earth creationism, one of the things that I am inclined to do is say, oh no, we think that we have all this evidence. But on the other hand, like you said, what if you're not 100% certain? Because you really can't be 100% certain about all of this. And so you shouldn't really go around claiming this full certainty when you're not certain about that, but you leave room for it. You say, okay, maybe the Bible goes this way, maybe the interpretation is that way. There's multiple ways to look at it, but since there's a group of people who feel this way, maybe I can't necessarily say, okay, I'm going to claim 100% certainty. So I think that was your point that I liked.
Thank you. And I say that for both sides. And I've gotten flack from young earth creationists also. And I said, guys, it's not like 2 + 2 = 4. We'd have no argument if the facts available to us were that clear. Mm-hmm. And they kind of resent me saying that. And I said, there are people on the other side like Hugh Ross, who was a friend of James Tour, and James Tour brought Hugh Ross to Nobel Prize winner Richard Smalley, who was an atheist and kind of a bitter atheist at that point too, and was instrumental in Richard Smalley's conversion. And James Tour works at the Richard Smalley Foundation, and after Richard Smalley won the Nobel Prize. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. And I said, don't you see, you can't just because you disagree with someone's ideas, I don't think it's right to be labeling them as like almost agents of Satan or whatever. I'm just like, I will debate them on the issues, but I don't, unless they go after my character. I said, don't do that. That's just not cool to treat your Christian brothers that way, because the facts are not that evident. And I say that as a researcher in these areas. I said, if it were that easy, I wouldn't be continuing to research. There'd be nothing to look into. I mean, that's just my feeling. So thank you.
Yeah, but I just watched James Tour actually, and Josh Swamidas on get into some little kind of heated discussion. And it was interesting because Josh Swamidas seems like he's very much against intelligent design. And I think that if you look at, like, I think that's a book, Signature in the Cell, that I haven't read yet, but there's
by
books
Stephen
out there.
Ware, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you just look at our DNA and you look at the structure and the way we've got these 4 letters that, some people say, well, they're just letters. It's just a name we give for these nucleotides. But if you look at the way they're ordered and how it all sort of looks like a code, doesn't that give you the idea that there's a coder?
Yes. I mean, we can frame it. I tend to be more of a formalist, but it on so many levels that is accurate. And so that verse by Jesus said, "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow." Mm-hmm. I tell you, Solomon in all his glory is not arrayed as one of these. I looked at it and said, Lord, the world really stinks. It has all these problems. You're going to tell us to look at lilies in the valley? I'm like, but he knows. In the 21st century, that means more to us. I mean, James Tour had that whole thing about how plants have this chiral-induced spin selective chemistry. And everyone's jaw was dropping who had some background in chemistry and physics. It's like, no one in the planet can build this. You could take all the best scientists and engineers. You cannot build something like this. Me being involved in a little bit of nanoengineering, I just like, oh my goodness. The designer has left a fingerprint there that says, hey, there's someone in the universe that's way, way, way smarter than you are. You can send people to the moon. You can send space probes out in space. You could build supercomputers. You cannot build this. All the wealth in the world and science cannot build this. And that's what Tour was really articulating. He said, I'm a synthetic chemist. I can't do this.
Yeah, and I just building on top of that, you mentioned fingerprints. So all of a sudden I started thinking, we have unique fingerprints, each human. And I think that's there's something about that just shows this whole idea of image of God. But the other thing is, I think about the Fibonacci sequence, which I find really fascinating, that you see the Fibonacci sequence in seashells and sunflowers and all of these different, in the galaxy.
I actually didn't, I've known of it in passing. But let me now, we're going to have such a great conversation. I don't think we're going to get through all the scriptures, but even if we don't, we have more scriptures, maybe another day. So let me share my screen here. And when they bring you, this is in Luke 12:11 through 12. And when they bring you before the synagogues and the rulers and the authorities, do not be anxious how you should defend yourself or what you should say. For the Holy Spirit will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say. And, oops, hang on. Let me try to get this worked out. I'm trying to get this StreamYard. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm learning how to operate the controls. The word defend, again, is that root word apologetics. And just for completeness, let me see if I can bring up the interlinear. So what I do is I type Luke 12, 11 through 12. Let me see if it will let me do that. Interlinear. And we could just see it. And J. Warner Wallace, in addition to 1 Peter 3:15, he cites this as how the word apologetics came here, and it says apologesthi. You shall reply in defense. So it is the same root words. So we get the word apologetics. And I said, this is interesting because, a lot of the gospel was preached this way back then. People were dragging the Christians sometimes close to their, imprisoning them or on their way to martyrdom. This was apologetics at its finest. And just like, that's it's a different conception than the way we have it here. But I was thinking, oh, Lord, may it not get to that point in the USA anytime soon, because I want to live happily ever after in this life. I'm kind of ashamed to say that, but that's, we would wish this for a lot of our loved ones, if not for ourselves, that it doesn't get to that point. But I was thinking, if it could get to that point where we're thrown in court and they'll say, why'd you do this? And I was thinking, you know what, maybe I'll just tell it like it is. This is my chance to make a defense for the gospel. I said, human authority doesn't determine what's moral. And I found out they recently, University of Virginia, kicked a medical school student. I don't know if you heard it. He was kicked out of the medical school because he questioned the definition of microaggression. And he's very woke. Yeah, this is I'm just like, oh my goodness.
My gosh. Wow.
So I want to say that article, I said, this is where society's going. I said, it's lost its moral foundation.
Yeah.
That you can't even, they used to call atheists free thinkers. I'm just like, this is not a free thinking country anymore. You're being told what to think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real shame actually right now. It's what's going on out there. And it's one of those things where you look at Title VII and employment, and I think about employment also, the idea of going to school. Title IX would be that, but you're not supposed to discriminate based on race, religion, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation now, or gender identity. However, an organization can discriminate, if you want to call it that, based on your political views. You're not really protected explicitly at our federal level here in the United States. And so some organizations do. They might see that they disagree with a tweet that you put out, and next thing you know, you're on the chopping block.
Okay, so next verse. And I know we could go down all of these discussions.
I love these verses.
So this was Uh, but I mean, just suffice to say, the way that we practice apologetics in the United States the last several decades has been in such a friendly context.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm contrasting this with the New Testament context, which is very much more uh, hostile to the Christian faith.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just, here's one. And again, it's the same root word. And so if we look at all the literature that studies apologetics, I just like, let's give this a viewpoint of the way it was actually done in the New Testament. And so this is Paul before Agrippa and Festus when he got imprisoned by the Jews and they wanted to have him killed. And so here in Acts 26, he said, I consider myself fortunate that it is before you, King Agrippa, I'm going to make my defense, apologetics. I'm going to make my defense today against all the accusations of the Jews, especially because you are familiar with all the customs and controversies of the Jews. Therefore, I beg you to listen to me patiently. And again, going back to the verse in what Jesus said, they're going to take you before the synagogues. He said, don't worry about how you're going to make your defense, your apologetic. And then here in Acts, this is playing out very much like the way Jesus said is going to happen. So there's this sense of apologetics in the New Testament. This is when you're getting dragged before the councils. And I was thinking, I pray for a lot of these Christians because now these pastors are being dragged in court for all sorts of things, especially now, under the coronavirus thing. It's like, well, what else are they going to be dragged in court for? They're going to have to make an apologetic now.
Sal, did you, I'm out of curiosity because you said you were raised a Catholic and I was too. And now I go to a Baptist church, but I wanted to know, coming from your perspective, did you know all of these stories, like the story of Paul and all of that? And did you even know the Old Testament when you were going through the Catholic faith? Because I didn't. And I can see why the church wasn't answering your questions because they weren't teaching anything. No one taught me to read I was never encouraged to read the Old Testament or the Bible at all.
Well, I only got bits and pieces when they have the Mass. And of course, they'll just read these nice passages. They don't read kind of like the more very difficult and really even passages I still have today. The one passage that really gets me, and I've been praying and thinking about it, is when Saul's sons were sacrificed. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, I don't know how, people ask me and confront me on that. It's just like, well, I have some of my thoughts, but they're not complete. And so, no, but they did at least read enough of the New Testament. And the one thing about the New Testament and the Jesus words, it can be said so succinctly. And it was enough to grab my heart. I think the one that got me the most was the parable of the 10 maidens.
Oh, maidens. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the 10 virgins. And the 5 of them didn't provide for their lamps and Jesus shut the door on them. And I was like, that's kind of harsh. Mm-hmm. But I said, I don't want to miss out on this party. That was the spark. I said, I don't want to miss out on this. And it really grabbed. Yeah, that was my favorite.
That's fantastic. Have you heard the story about Nabil Qureshi? How he came to Christianity?
Only in passing. No,
he had a similar.
Fill me in.
He's a Muslim. He had Muslim apologists, parents, grandparents. It's a big history. He said it was extremely difficult to ever leave the Muslim faith, but he'd met David Wood, and David Wood kept they were arguing all the time when they were I guess they were roommates in college. They constantly were arguing back and forth about Christianity versus Islam. And so he decided he wanted to know the truth. And so he started saying a lot of prayers to God, and he kept asking for signs. And then he has this dream where he's sitting outside of this banquet. He looks inside the banquet, and the owner hadn't come in, whoever was holding the banquet, but he sees David sitting at the table, and he looks at David like, I want to come in there. And David said to him, you've been asked, you haven't answered. And so he woke up and he called David Wood and he said, what is this about? And David's like, that's from the book of Luke. And he gave him the verses and realized that was the parable of the banquet. And he described the narrow door and all that stuff.
Wow. Yeah. And it's like, I think what you said, quoting the Bible, my sheep hear my voice. And yeah, that was the spark that brought me to the faith. And then it took me out of all that, the paranormal and astrology and occult in my life. I felt the joy and peace in my life after that point. And a lot of the psychic trouble started to go away. There's a lot of psychic phenomenon in my family, unfortunately. And so I think it's a generational thing, but the Christianity drove that away. I couldn't, there was a lot of psychic activity. It's like, yeah, empirically, I can't deny that either. And so just, that's the one thing that tipped the balance. I could see these spiritual things. So when those accounts of Jesus being, driving out demons, that resonated with me. I said, wow. And so I'll continue. So again, this thing, going back to this passage, this is Paul's defense. And when I read this, in no disrespect to God's word, I said, this account's kind of depressing because, so you're talking about your personal testimony and stuff, and people don't believe you. How did Paul make his defense? He talks about his conversion. He didn't give scientific evidence or presuppositional apologetics. His defense, his apologetic was exactly as Peter said, give the reason for the hope in you. And so he's giving this account. He's not trying to say, consider your presuppositions, consider your
the prophecies.
Yeah. And so it gets to verse 24 and he says, as he was saying these things in his defense, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you're out of your mind. Paul, you're out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you out of your mind. And so I'm like, gee, I was expecting the story that, he'll be so persuasive and all these people will just come to Jesus. And I'm just like, no, this is not how it plays out.
Yeah. And it's not how it plays out in real life. I mean, in our life either, in modern times.
And this was actually kind of when I tied that to the verse in apologetics, I said, oh my goodness, no wonder so many people that engage in debates or Christians get so discouraged and just like, no, maybe you might want to read Acts 26 and see what the outcome of most of your debates is going to be, because I'm just like, wow, the Lord left that for our instruction to say, this is what it's going to be like when you serve the Lord. You're going to get a lot of rejection and people calling you out of your mind.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's interesting that Paul does go back and use that approach and it's interesting to look at what kind of approaches work with different people, because I actually love the prophecies. And I think that you could make a case for Jesus based purely on prophecies or based purely on Paul's testimony, looking at Paul's whole story. When I first read that, which of course was right after I was born again, I read Paul's story and I was like, why did I never know this? Why was this not made? I was not made aware of the way that this man was marching to Damascus, ready to kill all these Christians. And suddenly he hears Jesus's voice calling him out. I think that's fantastic. And then he turns around for decades and starts preaching for Jesus. And why would he do something like that if he didn't know the truth? I mean, it's certainly easier to go back to being a Pharisee and to go pal up with Gamaliel, but instead, look what he did. And he ends up being—
It's Gamaliel.
Gamaliel? I can't even say that. Say that again.
I'm sorry. I hate being like such
No, say that again. Say that again.
Gamaliel.
Gamaliel. Okay, I got to get that.
Galileo is that scientist, that famous scientist. Anyway.
I said Gamaliel, and so I need to say Gamaliel. Okay.
I think that's right. Nicholas will tell you. Nicholas is our resident Hebrew scholar. I think it's Gamaliel.
Okay, I'll have to practice that.
Anyway, so the theme of our talk today, I said, there's no one size fits all apologetic. Mm-hmm. And the measure of your success is not whether people are converted necessarily. And that was probably really sobering. And there is a verse that was actually mistranslated, but got me thinking. In the King James, it says, you'll do this as a testimony against them. But the most correct translation, in my opinion, because it's the majority by far, and I also looked at the interlinear, is that this will be a testimony to them. But in the Old Testament sense, a lot of prophecies were testimonies against the hearers. It's like, when Judgment Day comes, it's not like you weren't warned. Mm-hmm. And so Paul is talking before Agrippa and Festus, and it's amazing. We have historical records on these people and what the outcome of their lives were. It doesn't look like they became Christians as far as we could tell, and it wouldn't surprise me. But it's kind of chilling that when we get up there on these debate panels and we make the case for Christ and it's rejected, this will be a testimony against them. The goal isn't, it could be God's goal, as when he sent the prophets out there and he said, you tell the people and they won't listen. I'm just like, well, then Lord, why send me out? It's like, well, it's a testimony against them. Our role is to be a servant of God, to testify of him. And he has his purposes. Some people are converted. And so this is my interpretation. I welcome your thoughts on that.
No, I agree. I think that it's definitely, I think I like Greg Kuchel's idea of planting a little bit of a little rock in somebody's shoe. You just, you give them a couple ideas and let that blossom, let God, water that little stone in your shoe. And so I think different people come to Christ in different ways. It's a lot of times it's not based on evidence. A lot of times it's based on spiritual experiences, but sometimes you get the evidence in addition to that and you realize, holy cow. When I was told about Isaiah 53 by that pastor that I mentioned, I thought, wait, why didn't I know about Isaiah? He said, who am I describing? He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And I'm like, that's Jesus. Where is that in the New Testament? It's not in the New Testament. It was written 700 years before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do the Jewish people know this? And so I got off the plane and I double checked, the Jewish Tanakh and the Jewish, and I saw, yes, it's in there. And I thought, oh my gosh. And so then I found Zechariah 12:10 and Psalm 22, and those mention that his hands and his feet were pierced, and they hadn't even invented the method of the crucifixion yet. They wouldn't do that for hundreds of years later.
And it's very powerful. And the one that Michael Brown gave that I thought was the best, he said the rabbis will say, well, maybe that was inserted in the account just to make it agree. And he said, okay, let's even grant that for the sake of argument. So what was prophesied about the Jewish Messiah? He would teach the Gentiles. First off, it said, in him the Gentiles will hope. Mm-hmm. The next That's true. Is he will teach the Gentiles about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said, name one Jew who has taught the world more about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, about the Old Testament than Jesus.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I was like, oh my goodness, and in him the Gentiles are hoping. Can you not see this? And Gamaliel, who I don't think really intended, he made kind of a backhanded prophecy like Caiaphas did. Mm-hmm. He said, if this is of God, nothing's going to stop it. You'll be fighting against God.
Exactly.
And I'm just like, yeah, you think about that poem, A Solitary Life, someone who had no mighty armies or held political office. Could we have picked someone more unlikely to have been the center of so much of human culture than Jesus Christ? Mm-hmm. And I was like, spot on, Michael Brown.
Yeah, I love Michael Brown. He's great. And that's, that reminds me, I was reading Galatians today because there's the verses of Galatians 1:7-8 that makes it really clear that, if you go beyond the Gospels and somebody starts preaching to you beyond the Gospels, that they're preaching a falsehood. And so that's the idea of, and if an angel appears, and so we have the angel Moroni and the angel Gabriel supposedly appearing to Muhammad. And so that just speaks to this being a falsehood. But the other thing that I want to mention that builds on what you're saying is, in this history book I have right in front of me, actually, Historical Atlas, these secular authors point out what drove Christianity into what made Christianity become as popular as it was. And they said it was this idea that Paul suddenly decided to start preaching to the Gentiles. And so Peter had mainly been preaching to the Jews, and Paul started preaching to the Gentiles. And in Galatians, it explains they actually had a little rift. And So, I mean, Paul did a lot of great work for us, and here he started off persecuting us.
I have to point out a very interesting, there is in the government archives at the National Institutes of Health, and they had to go through, how it ended up there is kind of an interesting story. It talks about the exorcisms and healings in the early church. That's what overtook all the paganism. I mean, if you think about it, we tend in the United States to think, oh, they had just a great marketing campaign. That's why Christianity spread. I actually was pretty offended by one thing that Jerry Falwell Sr. said. I mean, I think by and large he was correct, but he said something that was really offensive. He said, I think the United States has to exist because we have the money to share the gospel. I was like, no, that's not how people are converted, by your great marketing campaign and talking more. And we see this even the present day with Iran and China. They don't have big missionary budgets, but the gospel's spreading there. It's the power of God. And the reason paganism was overtaken was the miracles, the miracles of exorcism and healing. And even on your channel, you've had people that have had experienced healings.
You have a miracle.
I feel that was providential, very providential. I can't run away from that. I'm just like, thank you for reminding me. All these little things. I think the thing that affected my family is my mother was in a third world country in the Philippines, because that's where I'm from. They wanted to abort my sisters because she had hyperemesis. And mom and dad said no. She said, Mom will die for her kids. If both of them go, she's going to go with. If her daughters are going to die, she's going to die with them. And they prayed. That affected the family because they both were born healthy, well, relatively healthy, and they became nurses.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Of course, the medicine wasn't really good there. With me, they had a better doctor. They gave mom intravenous, they fed her intravenously. And so my birth was a lot easier, but it affected our family. But she should have died at age 26, and there's a lot of prayers said, but and
now she's 95.
Yes, praise God. She's not. They didn't think she's going to live beyond 60, so God's given her extra time, and I just thank God for that. So, and then again, I've had those visions. I don't know what they are, but where I was headed was the 4th century overtook the paganism. There's something about the Christian God, like the exorcisms. A Christian writer said, the irony is they keep going to Jupiter to try to exorcise them as demons. And it's like, well, Jupiter's a demon. And, and what they found was that the name of Christ was very powerful. That's what overtook it. It wasn't the marketing campaign or some savvy talk, because we have that example there in Acts 26. It wasn't a very persuasive speech, but Paul was being faithful. What was persuasive, and I'll show this, Acts 13. And it's a legit, that's why I did give an episode here on the hidden God, because Acts 13, I said, this is the way God persuades people. And this is also, I stumbled on this because I was doing archaeology. I was doing a talk on archaeology, and I was looking at the archaeology of Paphos, because one thing that has encouraged us that the book of Acts by Luke is authentic is the mention of all these people. And then we find out later they're real people in real places through these archaeological digs. And that was very influential in Sir William Ramsay's conversion. Famous archaeologist. And this was like only in the last 100 or 200 years. But anyway, I wanted to contrast Paul's talk in Acts 26 with his talk in Acts 13. So being sent out by the Holy Spirit, they went down to Seleucia, and from there they sailed to Cyprus, where they arrived at Salamis. They proclaimed the word of God in the synagogues of the Jews, and they had John to assist them. When they had gone through the whole island as far as Paphos, they came upon a certain magician, a Jewish false prophet named Bar-Jesus. He was with the proconsul, Sergius Paulus, a man of intelligence, who summoned Barnabas and Saul and sought to hear the word of God. But Elymas the magician, for that is the meaning of his name, opposed them, seeking to turn the proconsul away from the faith. But Saul, who was also called Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, looked intently at him and said, "You son of the devil, you enemy of all righteousness, full of all deceit and villainy, will you not stop making crooked the straight paths of the Lord? And now behold, the hand of the Lord is upon you, and you will be blind and unable to see the sun for a time." Immediately mist and darkness fell upon him, and he went about seeking people to lead him by the hand. Then the proconsul believed when he saw what had occurred, for he was astonished at the teaching of the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good.
And I contrast that. I said, yeah, Lord, this has brought up so many mysteries. It's like when Paul was before Festus and Agrippa, you could have done kind of the same thing, and he chose not to. And yet he did that in Acts 13. And so I was saying, the whole theme of this is there's no one size fits all apologetic. And then God acts, ultimately the persuasion is God's choice. I used to witness at James Madison University. I probably talked to hundreds, maybe even up to 1,000 people over 12 years who were atheists and agnostics. One of them I know got converted, only one. God willing, there were more. But in my time there, I only saw one conversion, and no surprise, it was the one person that had witnessed a very powerful miracle of healing in her friend's life. It haunted her in high school, and her mother didn't want her to be involved with Christianity. But she couldn't run away from the fact her friend was terminally ill in high school. 1,000 people prayed for that friend, and mysteriously she recovered.
Wow.
And that was her best friend. She said she's the most wonderful person that she's ever known. And here's this person who came back to life, basically. She was on all sorts of tubes and life support and still had scars from all of whatever they were doing. And they actually pulled the life support and expected her to die, and she recovered.
Wow.
And 1,000 people. And that affected her. And I sensed that she was listening to me intently. I said, why is this young lady, I mentioned to this atheist group that I said, I'm a scientist and engineer, and I'm just, I'm a Christian. I didn't intend to preach to them heavily, but they just surrounded me, and I talked for 4 hours. They wouldn't stop asking me questions. And, I just very polite, just kind of like the demeanor you see me on Modern Day Debate. I wasn't confrontational. And she was just listening to me intently. And I've never done this. Before this time or after, I said, I had a feeling this young lady really needs the Lord, and she's close. I called 30 people, the students at James Madison. I said, can you pray for this young lady? 6 weeks later, I see her in the church, and I asked around what happened. They said, oh, she accepted Jesus with tears this last Friday. And so that was God's power. So
yeah, that's the thing. You never know what a person needs. Like that pastor on that plane, I was kind of and I didn't even realize it, but I was a very weak Christian for a bunch of years. And I was starting to engage this idea that progressive Christians endorse. Like I wasn't sure about Jesus' resurrection, and I didn't know if he was just a mere, if he's just a mere prophet or something like that. And I never even looked it up, which is really shameful that I didn't look up the proof that's out there. But he sat next to me, and that's why the trilemma hit me so hard, because it says a man who was merely a man and did the sorts of things Jesus said would not be a mere prophet or a great teacher. So you must make your choice. And I thought, oh my gosh, I must make my choice. Either this man was and is the Son of Man, or else he's a lunatic or liar. And so I thought to myself, well, we know he's not a lunatic. He's not a liar. This man who came from the ancient Near East, who was a mere carpenter, has completely changed the world. And you have to give him that credit. I mean, more people who doesn't know I always get atheists say, oh, well, there's people everywhere who don't know about Jesus. I don't know. I don't know how many people have never, ever heard of Jesus. I'm sure there could be some little pocket like the Sentinel Island people. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, the mission, these Christian mission organizations keep repeating that. I'm just like, I don't know about that. I mean, you'd have to be very blind about history. And so there are definitely very large groups of people that have heard the name. And I thank God for the missionaries that have done a lot of Bible translations trying to reach those. Really, there are some small pockets, but I'm actually excited because more people are hearing about Jesus, and it's usually the people you would least expect in these closed countries like Iran. I'm
China?
just like, Iran, it's like, how's that happening?
Yeah.
You would not have, I mean, it's spreading. And actually, we're at an hour's mark, and I was thinking maybe we could do this sometime again and complete the rest of the scriptures.
Oh, I love that.
Okay. In the list. So I just wanted to share, there's no, I think my point is I'm just trying to share this with the viewers because they're interested in debate. I said, the measure of your success is whether you've been faithful to God, not whether people are persuaded. And I said, just look at Acts 26, because you can get really discouraged. And when I've been on some of these debates, especially modern day debate, where a lot of them are just anti-theists or whatever. But by the way, I have a Saturday.
I see you're going to be on there Saturday. Yeah.
And I'm just like, God, why do you have to keep throwing me to the wolves? This is not fun.
Aren't you going to get John Maddox on with you, or?
That's a tentative plan. Raging Atheist is going to be Amy Newman's partner. I'm just like, this is okay.
No.
I said, okay, Lord. That
I actually think he's a pretty nice. Down in all, I know that he gets. I heard everything said about him yesterday on Maddox's channel, but I actually, I mean, I guess he's really hyper leftist. I know that, and I disagree with all of that. But there's something about him that I feel like he's got a core inner, something good about him. I honestly think that. I think there's a chance that he could turn around. I'm not sure about Amy though. I'm not sure. I don't know her as well.
She and I actually get along very well. She keeps saying, "Oh, I wish you'd believe in evolution and be an atheist and join us." And she stood up for me when some of her supporters were just saying the nastiest thing. She said, "No, Sal's not like that. He's a great guy."
You come across very well on Modern Day Debate. I think your humble demeanor comes out, and that's going to work. That brings more people to Jesus than having the slickest arguments or anything like that.
Well, thank you. I just like, Lord, this is kind of. But it's like, well, yeah, I signed up for this. And I'm like, all right, Lord, if you're going to throw me before all these haters, I'll do it. It's nice to be loved. I'd rather be in front of friendly crowds, but okay. So this is what's going to come down. So where was I headed? So hopefully we'll have some meeting, future. And by the way, guys, if you really like this, just say so in the chat and say, we want S.J. Thomason back, and, and hit that like button. And
I haven't hit the like button. Let me hit the like button right now. There we go. You have an amazing thing. You have 0 dislikes. And every time even sometimes before I start my videos, I have a couple dislikes.
Well, I actually began to look at this. I said, I think S.J., this is a carryover from the Twitterverse, where you had so many atheist followers, and they're just hounding your website as a result, and they have nothing better to do. I also have a policy of banning a lot of people quickly, partly because this is meant to be a family-friendly channel. And when a woman from church said, I'm referring these 13-year-old girls to your website, I'm just like, oh my goodness, that's kind of scary. It's like, okay, we have to conduct this website in certain terms. So I deliberately make this website more of a Christian-friendly website, where it's kind of a place where they're kind of insulated from all the trash talking that we might see on tomorrow night on Modern Day Debate. So I just wanted to say, hey, guys, I'm willing to come out and argue with you guys, but in this place, this is where I'm trying to reach out to these younger students and also just have civil discussion on science issues, which is more my specialty. But it's like, no, I'm not backing down from taking on the top tier of the other side.
No, you do. You do a great job with that. And actually, somebody asked if this. I'm not standing outside. This is a green screen, actually. So behind me,
it's beautiful.
It's my neighborhood. It's a picture in my neighborhood. I rode on my bike and I took it.
Oh wow! Or yeah, I could have said, well, yeah, that's an example of SJ's painting skills.
Oh no. No, if you saw my painting skills, you'd see little stick figures.
So before we close, I because I shared the miracle of this young lady in school, and I've lost contact with her. It's been about 20 years, but I pray for her.
I want to say one thing. Let me just say one thing really quickly. You were talking about the audible voice of God, and I did hear the audible voice of God one time in my life in 2016 when I was in a hotel room in San Antonio at a conference, and I was thinking these kind of thoughts in my head that weren't good ideas, and God corrected me with what I would call as a voice of reason. And it's the story I won't get into so much, but I audibly heard his voice telling me and showing me through like a flash of reminders and pictures and images of people whom I loved, just basically saying, no, this is a bad idea. And then it was a bad idea, it turns out. And so he turned my life around. And I thought to myself, I never really thought much about it. And then I read Hugh Ross's book. And Hugh Ross said one time God spoke to him audibly to correct him for being prideful. And so I was corrected for my bad ideas, and he was corrected. And then Hugh said, it says in the Bible, actually in a few different places, it says you should appreciate it if God corrects you. He corrects his children, those he loves. And so in other people that I've heard who've had audible voices, and it's only usually like one time, one voice, but other people who've had that experience, it's always been to correct them. So, that I know of.
First off, I want to, there've been a lot of questions here, like this one. And
I have no idea about that. See, I'm not a scientist. I'm a business professor.
First off, I have just, if I've missed the questions, I was just so focused on kind of the pre-programmed show. I've not had a chance. Maybe I'll review some of this, but this website is organized to answer questions such as that. And sometimes my default answer is, I don't know. But look at the other evidences here. So when we talk about intelligent design or creation, I try to address that. There've been a lot of good questions that have just come and gone in the chat, and I know I've just missed them. I've seen a few samples of them, so apologies. I wanted to say about that young lady, after she got converted, every time I'd sometimes be in the dining hall at James Madison University, almost always I'd see her with her Bible open, sharing it. I said, yeah, that tells me she did see a miracle, and she can't help it but want to tell everyone about Jesus. I mean, when your life is touched that way, you can't, you actually have to kind of almost work at it so that you can take care of your other responsibilities, because all you want to do is just share about Jesus. And it's like, oh yeah, I have to kind of take care of the house and, do other things too. And I'm kind of negligent on that. So, so with that, could you share something about Susan, Slam RN? And so as we're talking about miracles now, I have specifically, like, people who visit my website, I try to make it prominent what I think are really big things, like the problem of evil, the problem of the hidden God. The viewers may not like my answers. At least I've tried to answer, because a big question is, why doesn't God heal everyone? And I tried to address that. But could you share something about Susan here? I was very compelled about that.
Yes, Susan is Slam RN, and she is on a lot of people's YouTube channels, and a lot of people have chosen to have her as a moderator because she does a good job reprimanding people. But she had an experience where she was in hospice, in terminally ill, and when you go to hospice, you know it's pretty much the end. I mean, that's it. That's when you're at the end of your life. Your family can no longer care for you. You have to have external help. And my grandfather went in one day, and he died within a day. That's usually how it works. And she suddenly had this feeling that Jesus, like a very powerful feeling, that Jesus was going to cure her. And the next thing you know, Jesus did cure her. And Susan is feeling perfectly fine today. And she's back. And this has been years ago. And so there are these terminal illnesses sometimes that can be cured. And it's, the other story that Susan tells a lot is of Barbara Comiskey Snyder. And that's told in Lee Strobel's book as well. But Barbara Comiskey Snyder had MS in the early 80s, and she was wheelchair bound, and her hands and feet had atrophied, and she couldn't walk, and she could barely breathe. Her lungs had almost collapsed, and she couldn't see. All of these problems. And suddenly she heard the words, "My child, get up and walk." And she got up, and she was able to walk. And so that afternoon, she went to her church because they had services in the afternoon, and everyone started cheering for her. They'd been praying for her on the radio, and people were, really caring about her. And when they saw her walking, that spoke into a lot of people's lives. And she's still MS-free today, and she's married to a pastor.
So praise God. See, and these stories are not talked about. I mean, on some level, we can understand this, and this is really hard to swallow because there are people in my church that are still ill, and they've served the Lord all their life. Yeah, and I just thank God they're not bitter that when they hear God heal someone else and they don't get healed. You can feel. I always worry that when these stories are shared, that someone will feel marginalized. But God says, be thankful for what God does for other people. Don't covet, but be grateful and glorify God, because this is a sign to you that are blind and ill, that you will be restored in the next life, if not in this life. And that's the proper way to interpret it. So sometimes it is hard to convey these stories of healing and miracles, especially when you're not experiencing, and that can either uplift you or if you have the wrong attitude, you could get very bitter. And that's what I hear these atheists say, well, God didn't heal me. And I'm like, you could look at this one way or the other, and you can let it make you bitter, and you could just, even when it's probably very obvious to you that this was real. And I had some cases where I shared a testimony about Charles Duke. There's this atheist who actually knew Duke because he had worked on the Apollo program. And when I told him about how Duke became a Christian and healed the blind girl, he shut up. He wouldn't talk to me. It's like, did something really prick your conscience there? Because you're ragging on Christians and how bad they are. And I said, well, I was just being Mr. Nice Guy. I said, well, I know we have our disagreements. Before I say anything else, I want to thank you for your hard work as an engineer for sending Charles Duke to the moon. And by the way, maybe you should know this. He became a Christian. He healed a blind girl in the name of Jesus. He was arguing with me every day. After I told him that, he wouldn't talk to me for 2 weeks. I just something pricked your conscience, didn't it?
Yeah. That's the thing. You have atheists in your channel, by the way. I mean, you have them in the chat, and I know a couple of them from seeing them on other channels. And so I just want to tell them one thing is, you're on God's clock more than he's on your clock. So if you're asking God to give you some sort of signs or something like that, and you're feeling like he's not answering you, he actually is answering you, but he knows that your heart's not quite ready. And it took me 20 years of praying and begging and asking and questioning and wondering, and before my eyes were opened and the scales fell off. And so you just have to remember that you have to be patient, and not just say, okay, I'm giving up on everything and I'm throwing my life into the bin or whatever.
And so it was only in the last few years I was thinking, God, this problem of you being hiding, it's bugging me. It's like, the atheists have a really good point. Why don't you just appear to everyone and we could settle this now? You put all the apologists out of business, which would be great. Then I could go back to the casinos and play blackjack. And it said in Proverbs 25:2, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is the glory of kings to search it out. And then only recently, as I was doing my Bible study on the hidden God, that verse really hit me, where Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, and a man sold all he had to buy it." And I said, that's very interesting, that treasure is hidden from most people, and you have to go out there and dig. It's the glory of God to actually hide it. It's your glory, the glory of kings, to search it out. And
great verse.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that makes sense of what apologetics is, especially for Christians. I use apologetics to strengthen the Christians, not so much trying to convert atheists, because
That's it. Yeah.
yeah, that's its role right now in my life. I kind of dread the day that we might have to do apologetics the way the Old New Testament way, where we're dragged before councils and we have to do the apologetics there. But I just wanted to share that. So that was pretty sobering there, SJ. They're on God's clock. Can you say that again? That was pretty good. Before
just that we're on God's clock and he's not on our clock. And so if we are asking and we feel like we're not getting an answer, just have that patience and realize that your heart's not ready yet. And he will, if you're honest and you really want to know the truth, he will make it obvious for you, but you have to give him time. He knows when you're ready. I wasn't ready when I was in my 20s and 30s. I really wasn't. I thought I was, but I just was not there. And so it took some shaping.
Well, it's been a great conversation. It's an hour and 20 minutes has just flown by. I'd like to thank all the visitors that have come to this channel, especially from SJ's channel. Just let me do a little promotion for my channel before I say goodbye, since I see a lot of new faces here. This channel, the audience has been primarily college science students, particularly biology students and chemistry students. I'm a molecular biophysics research assistant. I'd been a scientist and engineer in the aerospace industry. By a miracle of God, I ended up on the cover story, the 2005, April 27th, 28th edition of the prestigious scientific journal Nature, giving my Christian testimony.
It's wonderful.
Like, how did that happen except by a work of God? And I've been on national TV way back then. It's been a long time since I've been on national TV defending the Christian faith. And so I deal with the creation evolution controversy. I am a young earth creationist now, but I work and try to highlight that there are problems in that model. I think the stronger evidences are for intelligent design, just according to that verse where Jesus said, "Consider the lilies of the valley, how they neither toil nor spin." I think in the 21st century, we have very good evidences of God in biology, just because of the complexity. So even if people reject some of the other creationist ideas that I have, I want to encourage people toward that. And so anytime you see a video that says nerds, you're going to get some serious science education. I also have a side channel where I'm trying to teach college level chemistry. I hope to teach college level chemistry and physics there, so that people that may not have the chemistry background to understand some of the arguments can learn it. So that's a little bit about the channel. I am expanding out to have more discussions like the one that we have, that's accessible to people who are not in the sciences. So that's a little bit about my channel. And if you subscribe, you can subscribe for free. It helps promote my channel through the search engines. So that's my big promo. I'm learning how to do that now. And I'm going to put, for those who don't know SJ, I'm going to try to put, put in the video description her website and her channel. And I really look forward to the next time we can complete this discussion. It's been a lot of fun, and we're very honored to have you, SJ.
Thank you.
Please have the last word.
Oh, well, thank you. I just say, no matter what you do, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God.
Amen.